Hey, wake. KK, you want to be with the mid the go? Kaya so siga pe to skia no ma. Uta, kiti so ma tu ga me go. Ama twist mo na ko sini da kaya te, bi ko ti ga ni ta wi yan. Na ta wi si pisk. Me to ne kayas. Niko. Niko ta sige ta to pun ya ni ko se hi ga wen. Kinto to Islamak sian uti ay mi haw islamat to igam go. Gutauche. Nigi islamak sin. Name Solomon, and I have been working here for a long time at First Nations University. I am originally from Standard Mission, Saskatchewan. I was born on the banks of the Churchill River. And at 6 years old, I got taken away to residential school in Prince Albert. It was a traumatic time. If you are aware of trauma theory, you know that when a person experiences trauma before they are 8, their cerebral cortex is not yet fully developed. That part of the brain that takes care of higher level processes like consciousness, thought, emotions, reasoning, language, and memory. All those are affected by the trauma of being taken away. That's the way it was. You got the way mountain the Mac Kigway. You got to get the way to Scott Mac Kigway. You got to get the way we weren't able to think properly. We weren't able to feel properly. We weren't able to talk. I'm going to leave it. That's it for now. I'm going to leave it for questions for a little while, and then I'll go into stories, the importance of storytelling, in case there's some pertinent questions you need to ask, and I'll open it for questions.
So that was actually my first question that I wanted to ask you. Why is storytelling important to you?
To me, storytelling is everything. It is my reality, my way to truth. Storytelling helps me to understand my world. It opens my eyes to the wonders of the world, to help me look at the world like a child, to wonder at things, to see the magic in things. And this is all in the storytelling. In the storytelling, before school started, right? Before there were finished schools, children were brought up with stories at all times. In the winter times, when they started, in the winter times, the parents started telling stories, and in the stories we knew how to, we learned how to be parents. We learned how to be siblings in the stories and how we take care of our siblings. We knew how we were related to the world around us and how to treat the world around us. All those things were given us in our stories, and that's why stories are so important to me. But when those stories, when that ability to tell stories is interrupted by being taken away from your parents, then you lose all that education that is in the storytelling. I remember being taken away to residential school and not hearing stories in the wintertime. And I'd go home and I'd ask my mother to tell me the stories. But she told me, we cannot tell you stories. It's summertime. Wintertime was storytelling time. So from the age of 6 and 7, I was unable to hear the stories. But I learned the cunning of the white man. Let's put it that way. Treaties actually say that. Learn the cunning of the white man to get her educated. I'm glad you're laughing, Noah. This is really neat, we have this. I learned to read. I love reading to this day. I don't watch TV. I read. I still read lots of times. So I learned to read, and I learned to go to libraries, and I found this wonderful book called Indian Legends of Canada by Ella E. Clark. And there I found a few stories that my mother used to tell me. And I thought, oh, this is great. So I read the stories, and I thought, hey, wait a minute. This is not wrong. This is not right. This is not how I remember these stories. So Ella Clark really changed the stories that I knew. And as I grew older and I kept going into libraries to find stories, I found in university, I found some an Edward Hennicu collection in the McAfee in the library of Cree Trickster Tales, it's called. And there I found the stories of Wissahickon intact. It's just wonderful. They're all there, but they're all in English. Ah, right? What do you do? And then I found Leonard Bloomfield's Sacred Stories of the Sweetgrass Tree. And there, on one side of the page was Cree, on the other side was the translation. The stories were intact in Cree. Every now and then on the English side, they say, well, ... There's little elisions in the English. So I'd go back to the Cree part and find out, what did Bloomfield leave out here? And I found that stuff in the Cree section, and it was intact. Like, for example, Wissahickon comes upon these little grouse and asks them what their names are. Just a little highlight. And the birds say that they're called Okuskuhawisak, and Wissahickon right away shits on their heads. That section I knew from my mother telling me the story. I saw the same story in Bloomfield, and shits on their head was just ... in the English. But so I went into the English, into the Cree part, and it's there. So it's wonderful to explore this. You know, these stories are in Cree, but that's rare. It's rare to run into stories that are both English and Cree. And so, you know, fragments of reality, that's what we have. We have a lot of collections of stories collected by ethnologists and other scholars. And a lot of them are just outlines of the stories, just fragments of the stories in English. So ever since I was in high school and stepped into teaching at university, I've been collecting these stories and retranslating them into English and trying to bring back these lessons. If I pause, that means I'm ready for a question. Doesn't mean I just sounded myself.
I want to make sure everybody in the comments knows, who are just joining us now, that you're able to ask questions anytime. Leave them in the comments and I'll make sure to ask them. What was the first story you remember hearing, or what was one of those first stories that you saw in that book that you found?
It was the story of the flood. Wissahickon and the flood. That was one of the stories that I first saw in Ella Clark's book, and it was so neat.
Okay.
So it was really neat to see that story, but it was different from what I remember it as. It was really. So I managed to get the. I remember the story from my mother, so I was able to tell that story to myself and redo it again, and that story also is in both Bloomfield's and Edward Hennicu's version. The story of the flood. Pega hoy se quita este güey. Y que para mostrar hoy sashi chashi que está cava más lo que se me nace. Y ya pero what disconnect. Ta which saga que ne que se tape y ta is tape that hey that's so many times se me do. Oh, go down que got o te ta o me te me to aga check hota. Va es canasta ya. Yo tu outra que es más. Oh, que so outra que sai que está que eu ne usim sa begini pahimi mahiskana. Ni va ka kuchi me hota. Ugiskana. Das ma kai to ta komana. Oh, tá sunde mana o tipi kapawa pipi pasek. Ha, mahtina i dai mistake ne gese hison. O ta ne kan ni point. Ni ga speak up ka with the mo hanek. I gutta ka pi awa mistake ki ayat. Oh, wow, we shouldn't go to it. It was some dismas. Na ni gutta. I ga pa wa gota. Ugis shastikok. Ni ga gutta. Kana ap mi ak mistake. Ah, that's gamba. Oh, kapelo mi gutta mana ya wa ta mistake kontak ni pak. Ga ne at ni pa go go. Go isaki chak mistake e si so. Ni gutta wa mi ho ta hakiko. Ini pak. Dat begane ka we isaki chak si so na ka na la pi si so. Ei ta ta ma to hakiko. Ita ni pa hat. Ni tone ki ga skak lo ik ni pa hat. Ki ga o ki ma wa ne hanta. Si mi sigona ya pas pi hiu. Gets going, it matches it. Gane go to chat separate you. Gane. The name of the sea had to see me so good, so I got that separate you. Can you see it's not you? I'm going to get them keep matching here and hand to see me so my hiskana, we keep matching here. You're gonna get to get separate you. Get the basket or give it also. If the papa make him a gift, keep that the way I pitched the water well. No, not the way for one, not the way for one, rivet, not the way for one. That is the one, Jack. Oh, no, go down some time machine. Hey, what's the want to start with another? What's sweaty? Into another hello, Jimmy Sagonay. What we started exactly to got to be perhaps. Neither book getting a gas in time, but not to hello, Jimmy Sagonay. What? Hey, no, go dance the man. I got the man's feet and not the way in. Oh, yeah, I got to wish them more. I guess can to attack my speaker. Can I the way it? My other wish them more can the pay good. We started to attack and I go back and you got that. Take some. I think I am a good power shot. This we got what do not to go. Yeah, you do not to go. Yeah, it did. Đi qua big ito thì tao chỉ một số này cái hay à, eo số đâu yêu tao sen, cái nào tôi họ cái máu à, tập béo hơn tôi có, cái này cái đâu yêu cái đâu cái có cái tao sen, cái cái bây giờ cái mà tôi hốt ta chỉ một số này à, cái tao sen này bị bóp cái ba gì cái tôi nói là hen này baby ba cái tao sen thì bớt cái cái bà ta we say it's expect na he's back that it deep that though seems has to make which heck has to make was it there for me to with a skipper maski I'm gonna get a piece pat over the sisk you get a was it that me to you go at the bushwalk me to take hey kin no es como prima hogo muta the skipper you get skipper ah, man, scat, Peter. No one else is not get to be done. Matisa, what's the book? Get the go gig, Matisa, the not the mega skate. You're going to Margot. You're in the table gun, Matis never go on. Ah, spin gago get on more. You're going to can you speak here? Get that to that big bit on more in the bit. I got no new sim, so we say I can put out you. Get them if match hat. Oh, Matisa, when I get our neighbor. No, Tabu, I'm not going to go on. Keep it our ambisk. Nigga on us, and go get our ambisk. God, it can no speak or get so much of water. Eh, that way got big bit our ambisk. Eh, nip it twister. Niga new steam so we say that puta you. There you go. A cow you. How when you go? I'm not going to need a cool gun, but you need it to hold the Nick. No, Nick up. Go get the one Nick. The Kinduesk. Look. Wow. They got bigger bit the one Nick. We still but what new we started to see me say got puta you. There you go. Think Tom. Mamma's car kick the max now. This we never got the go get. Neither taco gun. She why? Neither taco gun. She did what's just because he season. Mamma's cat. Then the kick them. Matissa. I go get the what's just because I spin. Matt, the nigga knows behold. Get that the way got bigger bit the what's just good. We still but what new we started to see me. Maar ja, wat praat dan moet je zeggen? Aski, de mij nou toen zeg aski, aski dat. Ik ga niet goed na aski. We zeggen Jack, wat je ziet voor tegen mij nou toen ik daarnaast hou. Ik ga niet. Ach, ik get on go get. Ik ga nou wat just go get on go get. Ik ga niet in nooit behoek. Ja, zo maar zo. Ik dacht tegen bigger beter wat just go. Ik ga daar. Get on de boog. Dan Caputa dat we zeggen match ja get on. Ik ga niet goed gaan bij dat aski. Wat je ziet, dat je me weer tegen je doet. Naast. Maar het is niet heel goed te kijken daar nou. Dat is vast dan Hamusk. Je weet je hen. Ik ga niet goed gaan bij Caputa dat we zeggen aski. Ik ga daar mesje dat gaan maar haak en me zo aski. Ik ga naar aski. Caputa dat. Ik ga aski die maar bestaan. With us, can we see that back and back? The need to say like, get that to April. Get it. But this, same as after my head, I didn't do Bam Bato, the Matis asking the speech out. And I must, I want the Mahican gets to be about that. And he's go, he spelled the capital. The margin and my midhours, the much go to go and show, what I can this is it, the Mahican. Oh, get on. You're going to get stand up with that. Aski over. I got my hack or so out. The neck in no as you hit that coming sock. Yet Tim says I'm asking. You're going to get down to me, my hikana. Who see me, sir? Ask them. I think I'm in a gotcha about that. To be about that. You go, my finger. Oh, you spend good that piece of what we used to. You got to go back there on it. You got to go to me, so I'm asking. You got to be back out to my hikan. Don't it be at peace and behook. You got a chip in the march to go back there, hold the Mexican. Can't be sure people by Macamiso. If I'm going to sky with our Mexican. You go and you got to get patch to go with that. My Pacisco again, I know exactly I get this to be Macamiss check. Gayas, Gayas. Oops, that's what's been English, by the way. Okay. Sometimes I forget. A long time ago, as it were, MICEC was walking along when he saw a kingfisher sitting on a branch looking out into the water. So he asked the kingfisher, "Hey, what are you looking at, younger brother?" "Oh, I'm looking at the seals over there. They're playing around with the wolf pelt." And MICEC knew that this was the wolf, that his brother, younger wolf, who got killed by the seals. So he decided to make a plan on how to get that wolf pelt. And he asks the kingfisher, "Do the seals ever come to shore?" And the kingfisher said, "Oh yeah, they come to shore every evening. They come and sleep here." And so MICEC says, "Okay, I'm going to make myself into a tree here. And when they come to shore, tell them that the tree has always been here. And I'll give you some good colors as a reward." "Okay, I'll do that." So in the evening, the seals came back into shore, and MICEC standing on the shore, disguised as a tree. And the seals come over and looked at the tree. "What in the world is this?" And the kingfisher said, "Oh, that tree's always been there." Okay, I guess maybe you're right. And they went to sleep. As soon as they slept, MICEC made himself back into a man and stabbed the seals, sparing the king of the seals, Shimasuwana is his name, and spared him, just severely wounded him. And he took back the wolf pelt from the seals and he blew on it and made his brother alive again. And he painted the kingfisher the way the kingfisher looks today, in nice blue colors and white colors, and a nice little band on the neck, and a nice little cleft on the top there, like the original punk rocker he is, That's really neat. So he got his reward. So Wissahickon and the wolf went on their way, and they separated. And so Wissahickon was walking along when he heard somebody. I'm on my way to conjure. I'm on my way to conjure. Rip, rip. I'm on my way to conjure. Rip, rip. I'm on my way to conjure. So Wissahickon looked around and said, "Whoa, grandmother, where are you going?" "Oh, get away. I'm on my way to cure the king of the seals. This guy named Wissahickon almost killed him, so I'm the only one who can cure him. So go away." "Oh, Grandma, what do you do when you cure somebody?" So the frog told Wissahickon what she does when she does your curing ceremony. And as soon as she revealed her secret, Wissahickon killed her, stabbing it to death, skinning it and taking the frog suit out and putting it on himself, and off he went. I'm on my way to conjure. I'm on my way to conjure. And he goes to where the seals are and enters the lodge and says, "Oh, get away, everybody. Everybody has to go away because I need to be alone with Chimisugane to cure him. Go away." So all the seals got out of the lodge, and Wissahickon was left alone with Chimisugane. As soon as he was alone, he stabbed the king of the seals and killing it. But water started emerging from the seal's tail where he stabbed it, and just lots and lots of water, and started flooding the earth. So Wissahickon ran from the lodge and ran up the hill and called everybody, "Come, brothers, sisters, come, you got to help me build a raft," he said. And so they all worked together to build a raft. And eventually the waters rose and rose and rose, and they all got on board the raft, and the world was flooded. There's water everywhere. And they were floating around for days and days when Wissahickon thought, I forgot to bring some land. Whenever he's going to have to dive to go down and get some land. And so the loon said, "I'm a good diver. I'll go down." And off he goes into the water. And they waited for a long time for the loon to show up. Eventually he emerged dead. So Wissahickon picked him up, blew life back into him and put him back in. "Okay, we need to go somebody else." "Oh, I'm a good diver," said the beaver. And so the beaver took off and dove into the water. And they waited for the beaver to show up. And eventually he popped up, dead. So Wissahickon picked him up and blew on him and put him aside. "Ah, boy, we're going to have to get somebody else to do it." I'm a good diver, said the otter. And so he took off and dove into the water. And they waited a little longer than the last time. But eventually the otter popped up, and there he was, dead. So Wissahickon picked him up, blew on him, and set him aside. "Ah, boy, what are we going to do? We need somebody to go down there." All of a sudden, a little voice squeaked from the corner. I'm a good diver. I could go down. I'm a really good diver. I'll go down." So they all looked at this little old muskrat and said, "Okay, you could try it." So the muskrat dove in, and they waited for a long, long time. But eventually, the muskrat popped out of the water, dead. And Wissahickon picked him up and blew on him and gave him back his life. But he noticed that the muskrat had little bits of earth in its paws, both paws, and in its mouth. So Wissahickon picked that earth up and set it aside and asked him to go again. So the muskrat dove once again. And they waited and waited and waited for the longest time. And eventually it popped up again, dead. And once again, Wissahickon blew on him and noticed there was more dirt on his paw. So he took that dirt and set it aside. "I think we have enough dirt now. And I need some help here, beaver. Come on over here. Come on, hit the dirt." So the beaver started hitting the dirt with his paws, with his tail. And Wissahickon blew on the dirt. And the land grew and grew and grew and started growing bigger as Wissahickon blew on the land, and the beavers started pounding it. And it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. A couple of days of doing this, Wissahickon thought, well, let's see. Let's send Wolf out and see if the land is big enough. So the wolf took off, started running around the land, but he was back in 2 days. And he said, oh, well, it's not big enough yet, older brother. We ought to make it a little bigger. Okay, well, make it bigger. So they go. Beaver and him started working to make the land bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. After a few days of blowing on the land and pounding it, beaver pounding it with his tail, Wissahickon called the wolf again. Come, brother, come. You need to run around and see if the land is big enough. So the wolf says, well, I'll run. If I don't come back within a month's time, when the moon is full, then the land is big enough. So he took off. And everybody waited and waited and waited until the moon was big. And the wolf still hasn't arrived. And he's still out there somewhere running around to this day.
Oh, wow, beautiful. Kinanaskomitin for sharing that. And in Inanimon too, or Ithawewin in the language. I may not understand all of it. I may only understand parts like Aski, Nina, Amiskus, tiny little parts. But in the language, I feel it. I feel it in the language. So Kinanaskomitin.
Just think of this, okay? I was 6 years old when I got taken away to residential school, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was surrounded by English everywhere. Not one person spoke Cree anywhere around us, except once in a while we'd go and sneak off somewhere and speak Cree to each other, me and my brothers. My brother and my sisters, we sneak off. That's how we managed to keep our language that way. But, you know, as I'm speaking Cree, while I'm telling the story, think of that little 6-year-old boy being surrounded by English, not understanding a word. Then you could empathize with what I faced when I was being faced with English language. I think that helps understand the severity of what happened when we got taken away to residential school.
Mm-hmm. That way. It's really beautiful to hear you speak the language, and it's different in the language, the stories.
Mm-hmm.
I feel them, you know, I really love hearing that. So can I ask him within? And I noticed Noah unmuted. Did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say that, oh yeah, Ken and ask him within, it was so awesome. It was
Thank
such
you.
a great story. And it really resonated with me too when you talked about discovering books and how stories can really change the way you look at the world in a beautiful way. I'm I feel just like you. And I was wondering if in some of my searching for books, I feel like encouraged to continue this journey by a lot of authors. And I was wondering if, you know, if you'd want to share some of the people who felt really encouraging for you, or, and for example, there's that Stan Cuthand who I am really inspired by. I was wondering, did you ever get a chance to meet Stan Cuthand? And,
yes.
Oh, cool. And, but I'm wondering whoever else you found really encouraging for you.
I met Stan Cuthand, and he was one of my mentors, and he told me to continue doing what I do. And the thing that I remember most about him is, you know, he told me, watch out for Trisha, watch out for Wissahickon, he's everywhere. You know, and yeah, he is everywhere. And so I met Stan Cuthand. I never met the late Reverend Henneque, but I did see him when I was a kid. Residential school in 1960 in Prince Albert, we had a church service, a special church service, and And we had this in the church, in the chapel. We started the ceremony. Us little kids were right at the very front of the church, and one of my friends says, "Your mother's in the back." I hadn't seen my mother for a while, right? And so I looked behind me, and I saw my mother way in the back. She'd been in a sanatorium in Prince Albert, getting treated for tuberculosis. But I also saw the priest coming up the aisle, and this old ancient guy looked like the Cree priest. And he ended up doing the sermon that day, and he was Edward Ahiniku. After the church service, my brother and my sisters visited with my mother that day. This was in November. It was a nice birthday present for me, her showing up. So I've done that. So our paths crossed that day, and I never really, like I was so amazed when I found his Cree Trickster Tales on Facebook. If you do a search online for Edward Ahiniku Cree Trickster Tales, you'll find that document of his stories. It's really neat. And there's a lot, like Edward Ahiniku has done a lot of story collections, and so has Stan Cathand. Which is really neat. Stan Cathand edited a version of stories back in the 1970s. And we have this. Big-Big-Seas at the Yokewina, Sacred Stories of Big-Big-Seas Cree Nation. A lot of the stories that Stan Cathand collected in that 1973 edition are in this collection. Cathand's versions were all in English. These are both in Cree and in English. And I translated most of these stories. These were wonderful.
That's awesome. We'll have to get a copy of that book.
Yeah, you can get a copy online. You can find it online.
Mm-hmm.
And just look at it. Big-Big-Seas at the Yokewina. Look for that online, and you'll find it online.
Can ask him, we'll for sure get that.
And of course, we have other stuff, other collections by other people. Like we have this one here, Achadokewina and Achimoina, which is really neat. Rock Cree people. Once again, draw back. It's all in English. This is Brakeman. Hang on. Let me get my. This is Brakeman. Traditional narratives of the Rock Cree Indians. And it's just a wonderful collection. But a lot of times the stories are just outlines of the actual stories. So you have to fill in the pieces, the missing pieces a lot of times. And that's what I've had to do with a lot of these collections in English. I've had to fill in the pieces.
And then I guess another question I have is, so there's maybe people who are older than you that seemed really encouraging to you. Do you find that you get a lot of encouragement from young people?
Yeah.
They seem to love it.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Young people want to hear the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just had back in last month here, I had each Monday night I was having storytelling sessions. I'll tell you, I wasn't going to do it this year. It is tiring. I wasn't going to do it this year. And then one of my former students who has an 8-year-old son told me, are you going to have storytelling sessions this month? And I said, well, I wasn't planning on it. And he says, well, my son would really like to hear them. Okay, so this little 8-year-old made me do it. And
Awesome.
I really like that, And when my storytelling sessions also, my grandson was also a part of the audience, which is really good. We have to think of the children all times. A friend of mine drew this for me. It's really
so beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing. And okay, I think I have time for one more story, right? Unless you have questions.
We do have a few questions.
Okay.
There was one in Nihithwewin that it would take me 3 hours to figure out how to say. So I'm just going to play the There we go.
Okay. During Ashko, do I think that we should tell stories in Cree during the summer months? That's what Darian is asking. And, or is it or should we wait another year? Or tell other stories? Okay, that is the question nowadays, is basically, are we going to tell stories nowadays in Cree during the summer months? Because we don't tell them in the winter time anyway. Everybody's busy watching television or playing games online, right? Nobody gathers around anymore to tell stories. And one of my contemporaries, Beria Henneku, was telling a story online on YouTube. And he said, well, it's summertime, but I'm going to tell you a story. I don't care if snakes crawl into my teepee. We need to tell stories during the summer because we are losing these stories so fast. We have to tell them whenever we have a chance. So Darian had a good question there. And that's something that we have to consider. A lot of people don't know these stories. So we have to tell them whenever we can. But some of us diehards like me have a hard time telling stories in the summertime. I told stories in the summertime one time, and the next summer I spent a whole month in the hospital. So since then, I thought, I'm not going to tell stories in the summertime anymore. So I had to come over with that too. But this is really neat, some of the things that we were raised with in my culture, some of these beliefs, right? Don't whistle at night or the Northern Lights will come and get you. These kind of things, I don't whistle at night. Also, one of the things that my son laughs at me about is basically when we go camping, going along the Church River, and it's nighttime, I won't go near the water. If we need some water to make tea, I'll send my son to go to the lake to get the water. And he finally asked me, why don't you ever go get water at nighttime? I said, because if I go to the water at nighttime, the big water lynx will grab me. When I was a kid, I cannot overcome that superstition, if you want to call it. I can't overcome that. I can't go near the water at night because I'm scared of big water lynx and sippy soup to this day. So that's pretty neat.
That's funny. We have another question. Oh, go ahead, Jonas.
Yeah, with COVID too, and it being a safer gathering time in the summer when there's higher ventilation and when weather is good, and it being not as safe a gathering time in the winter, to me, it really shows that our ancestors knew something about what was good life and how to make use of the different seasons and to work with the different times of year and the different kind of spirits that are coming. So to me, even during the pandemic, I found as much as, it's difficult to stay home, I found, this is how our ancestors were. They stayed home during the winter. They spent time with the family in the winter. They had to get to know each other again on their own, just all and entertain your children. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, this makes a little bit more sense to me right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's a good life.
Well, the term for January or February, depending on where you are from, Kisebism, doesn't mean the great moon, like a lot of people say. Kisebism, it means the time of the year where everybody practices extra kindness to make sure that the children are safe, that they don't play outside all the time. Kisebism, from Kisiwatsuan. And that's my little granddaughter wearing wearing a Sasquatch onesie. Her mother thinks that me and her are going to go Sasquatch hunting one of these days.
We have another question from the chat from Desiree. What would you say to Indigenous youth who don't have access to language keepers and struggle to find help?
I think this is one of the good things about online stuff. You know, because we have a lot of online resources that the young people could access. We have things like Cree Literacy Network. Some of you know about that, right? Cree Literacy Network. If you do a search on my name, you get about 15 pages. Sorry. But there's a lot of language lessons on there that young people could get, including stories. They're both in oral, Cree, and English, and it's also written text on those things. So we have those. And we also have Cree language videos where we have audio in Cree and in English and the written text. So there's lots of resources that a lot of the young people can do. Like Darian here, who asked a question. Look at that, what he wrote on chat. Darian couldn't have done that 5 years ago when he started learning language. He still sounds funny, by the way, but that's okay. But he does, you know, he does individual studies a lot of times by looking at the online sources, and he's come a long way in his teaching himself, basically. And that's just it. You know, people have to make a decision. I want to learn. What does it require to learn? It requires extra work on your own. And that's the thing too, that Stan Kethana had told me, and another of my mentors was David was Ahab Spence. He also told me, both men told me, if I want to stay in this work, to be prepared to do some extra work on my own, and to be able to do this stuff on my own, to accept to stand alone. A lot of times I've felt alone in my work to this day. As a matter of fact, I got invited to join a group last week, and I said, why should I join a group? I've been working on my own all my life, so. The guy just laughed at me and said, okay, I know what you mean, go ahead. But that's the thing, if you want to learn, you'll have to do things on your own a lot of times, you know, because you're not going to be, even if you decide, you and your partner decide to go and to do study together, it's going to happen that your partner might not be able to do it. So you have to go on your own and do this stuff. And that's what I tell students and people who want to learn. They have to do things on their own, be determined to do things on their own. And that's the best way to learn. And there's so many resources online to be able to get at.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, it really shows what you said, like when it's the link between the young people and the elders as well. The young people wanting to know gives reason to the elders to keep working and to come together. And so I think for those young people doing that study independently, it's like every time you do it, then every winter you can understand more and more in the language when you're being told. You can make more and more links the more you've worked through and grown.
Mm-hmm. That's really neat. The more stories you hear, more often you hear, you'll get different lessons from the stories. there's a story called Chichibistigon. It's one of the stories that's one of the first stories, probably the first story you hear as a child when they start telling stories, where the wicked rolling head goes after these two boys, but she's always impatient all the way through. It was not till this month passed that I realized that her impatience is part of the lesson in this story. Took me this long to figure that out. So be patient with yourself. And when you're ready, the lesson will be there for you to digest.
I could say,
and Trissa, were there any more questions, or is that good for the chat?
I think that was everything in the chat. I know you had one more story you wanted to share, Solomon.
There's 10 minutes. Got 10 minutes left. Okay, remember I said stories are fragments. A lot of times they're fragments of stories. What I'm going to tell you is a fragment of a story that nobody has written. And there's a story about chakapis, lots of stories about chakapis that have been collected all over the place. But this particular story has never been collected, so I'll put it together. But since we only have 10 minutes, I'm going to have to do it in English. Okay. Long ago, kaya sisa. Oh, ito skinny school. You got me na pieces. Be a gawk mix work. When you get go out, when he work. You go if my chemist be a gawk sick. You go. Them so na pieces. Chaka pieces the castle. You guys are give system. I go. Umissa. Chapia. You got me the akasquak to me. You go take season. Minä olen nyt tämä on chakapiisi, jos sitten mä tumissa. Chapia eikä meillä chakapiisa. Akaskua. Minä ei ota päämme mutta hiu. Ei ota. Mä käsi kuin itse käsi tämän kehtaan tut niin. Mä tes mikä kissi rohti wap miu. Kissi kaupiisen. Otan pissa ja mä wap miu anti uskin syö. Kaava tion uskin syö no tiu juet. Ei ota. Ei ota. Cháu ta to ta kasko vi ka wiska hiuta na pis papa mut niu ta kasko ta hit tanegta it mutta hit ma da wa ta wisik ta kasko ne ga mutta hit ya ne tane sei ka ske ta ki na ke ta ka ya ba mutta hit to kita tu ba ka so abet ma tsin da ne ta ka ya ka wa na ko kuma na ki sisa ne ko ta mutta na ki na ti Tämä jos en teitä kysymään. Tämä on ja nosto tämä. Kita ya. Oh, tio mä kisse kok kita yan. Nyt tämä mä ipis. Tuhta hiska oikeasti sitä oppisen puhuta kita yain. Niin että takana ehkouksen tämä poiketa vaan me omissa niin tiivasta sisiä ja itti tati paattikot. Niin Chaka piisasta miettä te pitää uskin isku. Tämä on nämä. Muatkin siitä on chakapiiska niistä tavit. Niin kuin piisum kiissä piisum kiitat ne sinne syö. Otia vaan ja oikein myösastum pinas. Niin kuin teis kiissä kokuista on tehty umsima. Niin että kenö siku teja ja oikein kiissä kohta. Niin kuin kiitattavia uutta ja avuttaa ja näpises kävät mä minä kiisissä. Uskali, siitä uskali ja mitä vaan no kuitenkin se mitä hän siinä otan kun minä siis tu ei ja pihki aina mä kita katsit navo tsaku sago tegisi kohta ja tsak nyt tämä voi mitä on kaikki siihen anna no teki ja kuma okei paski käy itti tuhtiak no samtiska spi Kisra bisum paxim utiniti iskoga suapiak utipi tohti kikilawa ila kiko sistemat nawa ala pe kitani hatawi ego sito nego ta pi hogo pismo pi hego pismo ita paximo dat nego ta Be this go to prison back some way. You go, Jack Abbey to go almost a spat out go come like this guy. Can need that we work at that big kick out. Go ask here. You go and you got that. Yeah, check. Go ask here. You got kick the ham way, seems out the squeezes. You go, can you start get that melt dips guy be some. I guess see bit them how Jack Abbey's. That time I know dips guy be some go how is it? Can you when I get that meal? Then I the guy can know what. Get that the way one hit, one miss. I know I can see me did them. You guys for me get that, but you can go up mat what those see me. Kiss go be smoky out. You got you go a Jack Abbey's. You did. Kiss go be smoky out. Long ago, there lived a young lady, a young woman, taking care of her younger brother. They had lost their parents, so they were on their own. And the young boy was always up to something. He was a very, very curious little character and got underfoot a lot of times. So the older sister made him some bows and arrows. So the boy was really happy with his bows and arrows and shooting all over the place and having a good time. And the son looked down and saw the young lady and wanted her for his mate. So he devised a plan to capture the young boy. And so the son laid out arrows along the beach and up along the beach there. And knowing the boy would just go ahead and pick up the arrows. So the boy would pick up the arrows, shoot the arrows all over the place and always pick up another one. He was so busy that he didn't pay attention to where he was. Eventually he ran out of arrows and he looks around and he saw that he was nowhere he recognized. So he looked around and he saw a hole. So he went over to the hole and he looked down and he saw his younger sister and his older sister down by the beach calling for him. Jack Abbey's, where are you? And the son hollered, oh, he's up here. If you want him, come on up. So the young lady went up into the sky to be with his younger brother, her younger brother. And they stayed there for the longest time. And so one day Jack Abbey's came along and came back by the hole to have a look and he saw a spider. And she, oh, Grandmother Spider, what are you doing? And the spider says, well, I'm making a net here to catch the stars for the sky so they stay put. Oh, can you make us a net to go down to the earth, me and my sister? And the old spider says, well, yeah, just wait until the sun starts down over on the horizon. As soon as he does that, I'll make you a net to go down. And so that's what they did. Eventually the sun set on the horizon and Jack Abbey's and his older sister ran to where the old lady spider was. And the old lady spider put her net down to the earth and Jack Abbey's and his older sister climbed down to the earth and they were back home. And they were making their way around all the time. And every time there was a full moon, Jack Abbey's would look out at the full moon. But his sister told him not to do that. Don't look at the moon too long. But he didn't listen. Eventually, his older sister lost him. Jack Abbey's, where are you? Jack Abbey's, where are you? And he couldn't find him. Couldn't find their older brother, his older brother, but she looked up into the sky. And there on the moon is Jack Abbey's, still holding his bow to this day. One of the questions Cherise had asked me is, what is your favorite story? That is my favorite story. My mother told me that ages ago, and I only had bits and pieces of it in my memory, so I had to fill it in. The story of listening, being aware of your surroundings. and listening to the elder people telling you not to do things. Thank you for having me. I think we're running out of time.
Gonna ask Omith then. I need